Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And visit patreon.com/vmspod or paypal.me/vmspod to make a one-time or recurring donation and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. Well, it is a crazy week ahead. I have a 3-podcast day on Tuesday in New York, a day trip to D.C. on Wednesday, getting my old man to the doctor on Thursday, and then fixing his garage door for some reason, off to Columbus on Friday for this week's memorial service for Tom Spurgeon. I've already edited next week's episode featuring Peter Cooper, but I'm going to hold off on recording the intro until I'm back from Columbus, so it might be a day or so late. I just get the feeling that the memorial for Tom this weekend is going to be kind of a momentous thing for me, and I may want to share some of that with you. I also started physical therapy this week for the nagging calf injury that's been keeping me from running for the past month plus, the complication of which has been further driving me insane. But it's showtime, folks. This week's podcast features the painter and avid motorcyclist Edie Nadelhaft, who has a brand new exhibition opening this week in New York. Now, I met Edie earlier this year during my crazy morning with the writer, art critic, and artist Frederick Tutton back in April. After recording with Frederick and then going to Cafe Mogador for brunch, we headed over to the gallery that was showing his work. And Edie, a friend of Frederick's, just came in to check out his stuff and discovered he was there, and she and I fell into a conversation. Now, Edie's a painter and mixed media artist with a couple of really distinct lines in her work, which we'll talk about during the episode, like her biometrics series of super up-close paintings of the surface of her skin and fingerprints and eyeballs. She also has a series of mixed media pieces about the pharmaceutical industry, which I found on her website and also found really, really funny. We don't go into that in the episode, but I'll give you her URL at the end of the show. Make sure to check it out. Now, her new exhibition, Evening in America, features paintings from her motorcycle trips around the country. See, when we met at the gallery last April, Edie was telling me and Frederick about a bike trip she and her husband were planning, and their whole thing about staying off the interstates and getting out to see the country, and sometimes Canada. And I thought, it sounds like someone I really ought to talk to for the show. So now that the new exhibition is out, which will be opening today, December 10th, 2019, for you time travelers out there, you should go if you're in New York City. The paintings from Evening in America are just haunting. They are these evocations of the buildings and the roads and the structures that live on without us. Some of the works are actually embedded in the rearview mirrors of a real motorcycle's handlebars, while others are full canvases. Some are painted on round canvases. They're all gorgeously strange, like this unnatural world without people, seen from the perspective of a rider. In an email last week about the gallery opening, Edie wrote that the series explores the visual nuances and psychological ambiguity of twilight in paintings of otherwise unremarkable, pedestrian, yet distinctly American settings. And Evening in America, of course, harkens back to a few presidents ago. Now, the Evening in America show runs from December 10th, 2019 to January 25th, 2020 at the Lions Weir Gallery at 542 West 24th Street in New York City. There'll be an opening reception on Thursday, December 12th, 2019 at 6 p.m. I won't be able to be there, physical therapy. But like I say, this stuff is really evocative and compelling work. So if you're in the city, go check it out. Now, as caveats go, we recorded at Edie's studio downtown in New York City, so some car and truck noise outside. She had the AC going because of the thermodynamics of the building. So I filtered that out, but we didn't really wind up with any weird audio artifacts. So that's good. Now, here's Edie's bio from her gallery's site. Edie Nadelhaft studied painting and art history at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, and SUNY Purchase, and received a BFA with honors from Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. Her work has been exhibited at art fairs, museums, and galleries throughout the U.S. and internationally in Taiwan, Shanghai, and Basel. Her work is in the permanent collections of the Ford Foundation, the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Center, and Falcon Works Theater for Social Change, and has been written about in the Detroit News, the American Scholar, Domino Magazine, Juxtapose, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Wall Street Journal International. Her awards and residencies include the Artist in Residence at Platt Clove, Artist in Residence at the Visible Vault, Yellowstone Art Museum, the Fine Arts Painting Department Merit Award from the Massachusetts College of Art in Boston, and the Combined Jewish Philanthropies Academic Scholarship. Edie has lived and worked in Lower Manhattan since 1998 and has been represented by the Lions Weir Gallery since 2013. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Edie Nadelhaft. So, new show.
Yeah.
New solo show.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. What's the background and how much do you have left to get done before it opens?
I am working on a couple of pieces now, but everything is very on track, which is nice. Mm-hmm. This does not come out of the blue. Gallery and I had a conversation months ago about setting a date, and I just come up with my idea about what the show will be about. And but this kind of work it's not predictable in terms of a production schedule so much, because there's a little bit of excavation, if you will. Yeah. It's not like making a product.
Yeah.
There's always a little, I don't know, I hate to use a word like magic, but it is a little like I could work on a painting.
You could use the term chaos instead of magic, but that implies
painterly chaos is a term that I have used, but it's not accurate. No, actually, that is actually painterly chaos describes a kind of painting that I really like, and I have that is the final product that you might appreciate within certain phrases inside of a full work of mine, but. It is more that I will work on something and get it mostly done, and it'll not quite be, it won't have that who knows what it is that makes it really good, mm-hmm. to my eyes anyway, and I might work on something, and it is time consuming, and it can be laborious, but part of the way that I combat the labor aspect of it is I just work on it in a slightly unstructured way. In fact, I look at my work, I get very close to my paintings, take my glasses off. I don't look, I make it so I can't quite see that mm-hmm. clearly. And then I kind of go like, blah, 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 blah. And then I back up and I go back and forth and like I do these kinds of flurries of activity and hope that something good is there. And when I back up and see, or get close and see, depending upon whether I'm working on a fine detail or a high level image perspective, then I look at it and say, then I let my eyes either go into focus, put the glasses back on, whatever it is, and say, oh, there it is. It's like I find it in there somehow. And it's very fun and very exciting. Occasionally, that aspect of my work is never frustrating. The frustrating part comes in, obviously, if you see my work, it's very realistic in that There's no Chagall floating around in space type thing. So there are areas that become frustrating in that when I'm pulling out that tiny detail that makes it real, that can be annoying sometimes. It's a straight line. Yeah. But most of the time, it's just it requires a lot of lead time, so to speak, because I will, again, these works are complex and labor intensive, but really for them to click, something happens. Often, it's about walking away at the right moment, and many other times it's about coming back and just doing the little blah 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 blah, and it's like, oh my god, now it's good, and it was not. Yeah. I was not happy with it. Sometimes I keep my works like to combat my impulse to nitpick or fuss at them. I hang my works upside down. So when I walk in here, I don't first see, like I could just walk in here and I just all the time, and it's very bad, very, very undisciplined behavior, but I will walk in and not even take my coat off and start like, I'll see something. It's like, oh, it's not quite right. And I will start diddling around with something. Fussing at it. Yeah. Exactly. And while I probably have done some very good work that way, it feels so disorganized and undisciplined. So I have to fight some of my poorer instincts. And one thing I can do is if I can't see it, I'm not going to do that. So if it's upside down, I'm not like, I turned half of these paintings were upside down before you came over because I was just, they are done. But until they're me thinking out you had some sort of this place, I could still fall into that behavior. So, but it's exciting and fun. No
when it comes to a show like this, though, at what point is there enough of a collection to commit to doing a show versus, I still have a few more things I want to paint for it. I just don't know. As a painter, what
my work is ongoing. I don't stop. I was listening to your interview with, I think it was Nathan Englander, and he was talking about block work, there's a creative block and that sort of thing. And
because he's only
he was saying like, I don't get that because I'll paraphrase him, but for me, I don't get that. Not that everything I do is wonderful, but I don't stop working. I just keep making paintings, and because I can usually keep myself amused that way. And so the work is ongoing. Mm-hmm. And then when I decide, when I am planning to do a show, the timeline is, the gallery says to me, well, we have this time, will that work? Or what about it's 2 months later, whatever. And I will decide based on where I am in the current body of work, what would make most sense. That said, I have two completely divergent veins, if you will. I hate that. It's not the right word, but they're
roots.
Threads is
branches.
Too ephemeral.
Yeah. Skeins.
But bodies of work might be the right thing.
That's actually good.
But it's not exactly accurate. I work on, the whole time work on these, the current show is called Evening in America. And
which I meant to ask. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's called Evening in America, and it is paintings of, based on road trips that I take throughout the, we'll call it, not I was going to say flyover country, which is so obnoxiously elitist, but a little accurate in that these are places, not so much flyover country, although they are, but they're places that I would not deliberately visit were it not for the fact that I'm riding a motorcycle and my husband rides too, and we take trips and we deliberately avoid interstates and go to places where there are nice roads to ride, and we meander around and soak it in and try. Sometimes we are in, I've been to the South a lot. It's not a place I would probably be drawn to out of, honestly, out of fear. I'm an uppity woman. I'm Jewish. I'm a lot of things that I've learned growing up were like, it's not so popular. I'm not a real strict adherent to gender norms. I'm not in the identity sense, but in terms of I am a motorcyclist, and I've never learned that I was supposed to, it's interesting because people wonder, because there is an enormous amount of bias and sexism in the arts, And for a long time, I wasn't fully aware of it because I think I stupidly didn't expect it.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you don't expect things, you can get around them because there's a certain aspect of not engaging with something because you're just not legitimizing it, but not deliberately.
Yeah, it just doesn't occur to you.
It's not going to work on me because obviously this person is not taking this bait, but I would do that unknowingly. Anyway, that was a huge a tangent. So there are two the bodies.
So the south.
The two bodies of work are I paint the body, my body, as in, and it's very much the surface of my body. It's my hands, the surface of my hands, my eyes, their irises and fingertips. They're called biometric self-portraits lately, but I have been painting the skin surface for a decade more. And the other, so I paint my body, and then I guess, for lack of a better term, my milieu, but that isn't...
Métier? I don't know. All these words are French.
Yeah. But I'm not going to say yes. But my socio-psycho orientation in the world, like where, the work is not... So the road trip work, which is The Evening in America, could be it has a political note because actually the title is a joke on, not a joke, but a
play,
a reference to an old Ronald Reagan political campaign ad that was, showed people like getting up in the morning, which God knows why anybody would do that. But, and also in a bright sunny day, and they're going to work, and the voiceover is, "It's morning again in America." And so I am referring to that, and obviously, or not, it is not exactly morning over here right now. Hard to say where we're heading. But I also think that everything is political to a certain extent. It's what you choose to talk about, write about, paint about. Just as everything is a self-portrait, everything you do is a self-portrait, everything you produce has it can't not have a political aspect to it because just no matter what you say, the fact that you choose to say something about this thing, that's a comment. You're saying that matters. This matters. Yeah. And when you're painting the country, you're saying something about the political environment. I think it's impossible to separate those things unless you really want to be full of shit.
Now, how do you characterize the subjects of the paintings themselves? What do the paintings consist of? I mean, I've seen some of them, from your descriptions, but how do you describe the visually the work for people? Many of
almost all of these paintings have the central character is an actual road, like there are little highways, and I use the word highway in quotes because, as mentioned before, these trips always involve a deliberate avoidance of the slab, as we call it in motorcycle parlance, which is the interstate, the big highways. So these are little highways, though. They're roads that have been used as some of them are very small, farm to farm. Who knows why they even exist? Or there's a couple of roads on Cape Cod, one in particular that runs the length of the Cape through the literal end of the earth in Provincetown. And it's so it's not exactly a highway, but it's like sort of the way. It's the only road. But a lot of these roads were. Initially, these were the truck routes. These were the commerce routes, and then the interstates came, and then, the other changes in the global economy, for instance, they made these places less significant, to put it politely.
Yeah. This is what we all go through. Not living in the city, out in the suburbs, you when you lay down Route 287 through northern New Jersey, all of a sudden, all those little areas in Wayne and Oakland, they all dry up and disappear because people can just drive right over them on the
and you don't need them anymore. And a lot of places, So when we were talking about the subject matter, so there's a road and there's some stuff. There's always some remnant of humans, but no, like as in there's infrastructure. Maybe there's a power line. Maybe there's a sign, some buildings, but there are no people in these paintings, and they're a little spooky, maybe. But I find that they're all set. This particular group of works is all set in either late afternoon or early evening, or a couple of them are like in the dead of night, which has a lot of feels for a lot of people. I happen to really love the night, the dark. It's not frightening to me. It's exciting and it's calming, and sort of one of my go-to, calm the fuck down memory for me. Like when you're like trying to get yourself
down,
anxiety into control, is to be driving on a trip at night. Nobody's talking.
Yeah.
And it's dark. And it's quiet, and all you can hear is the engine, and it's like maybe everybody's asleep. I never slept in car trips, so who knows? But so I see them as peaceful and eerie for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that. I don't find that. That's not a negative. I like cultural touch points for me are things that are not necessarily, I don't know, cheery, but they're not. They're just spooky, weird, I don't know. Things that have corners, so to speak, as in not pointy things, but dusty things that you don't. I like we were talking earlier, I think before you put the mic on, about early Jim Jarmusch movies, like these rambling things and sometimes they were road trips, for instance, but also more that sort of what's going on there. Nothing is really going on there, but there's some strangeness and that is, I think, quintessentially American.
Yeah.
And that when one of the things I'm trying to do in presenting these things is, this is America. There's so much America out there that is not in a Gap ad or whatever. Gap is dated reference. But, like, there's this thing. It's an enormous country. I mean, it's just enormous. We have every climate you can imagine. And I, having gone out in the desert for sort of the first time, within the last decade. And I grew up in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Spent a lot of time we had a summer house in Cape Cod. I spent my whole life on the East Coast, pretty much. Pittsburgh's not on the coast, but Squirrel Hill, very liberal East Coast kind of place.
Yeah.
And then going out to the desert is just like, oh my God, it's like Mars, literally, like another planet. It's so strange and empty and beautiful and weird. And then all the little towns and even places where I feel uncomfortable because of my personal identity, it's like they're interesting and not shiny. And they're not, and that is not always bad, although it is often bad lately, especially because I've gone back to places that I've been to before and seen the decline. Yeah. States like West Virginia, they are suffering. And there is that negative aspect to it. But I think of it more, not that I think of it more this way, but the thing that strikes me over and over again is how weird this country is, how not what it tries to sort of export as its identity of, we are outgoing and plucky, but we're also like kind of crazy in an interesting way. Idiosyncratic is more what I should be, the word I should be
psychotic,
using.
either or, but
well, psychotic is not a thing that I would celebrate, but
no, but it's there in some respects. Yeah.
But just even just, and without being self-consciously kitschy, because there's all that stuff where people go around and take pictures of every roller coaster in the country, or all the weird, like, giant chickens that you can, walk into and buy eggs.
The Muffler Man.
What's the Muffler Man?
Just the
the Michelin Man.
Yeah.
Oh.
You get those sorts of.
So those things are cute, but they're too cute, and that's too self-conscious.
Roadside attractions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So.
So it's more like roadside repulsions.
Neither.
Okay.
I like
that's a great job. I'm going to use that for something.
I like that, but you know what? I really think that what I'm interested in is something less obvious.
Yeah.
I always, come back to this idea of the second impression. That's what interests me.
Yeah.
And I like things sometimes that are really big, bright, and red and in your face, but they have a little something else, you know. And the second thing you think of is what's...
Now, when it comes to this stuff, is it your memories of passing through there, or are you stopping and taking pictures? I just don't know. Like,
oh, yeah, no, it's all of the above. So I get off the bike, take pictures. Sometimes, every once in a great while, I will shoot something with a GoPro, but video isn't really useful to me. That's more, so most of it comes from inside my mind.
Yeah.
I use a visual reference. I'm not playing with you.
That's I wasn't how much is, based on, okay, this is something that caught my attention. I stopped, took a picture, and now I'm going to
But a lot of times it's stuff that doesn't catch my attention. I just stop and take pictures. Like I just stop, get off, or just not even get off the bike, just turn around and shoot what's behind me. There's a lot of these paintings. There's a whole group of this work that's actually designed like a rider's eye view. So there's some pieces are very large and they're on stretch canvas. Some pieces are tiny and they're actually inserted into mirror housings and displayed on handlebars. So it's as if you are sitting on a motorcycle and you might see these things behind you.
Yes.
So I take pictures. I do sketches sometimes when we're on a trip. So I take these like weeks long. I take a lot of little trips throughout the year, but in the summer, I always go for 2-3 weeks, just sort of in a direction that is not as casual as that sounds, because my husband plans our stops. Mm-hmm. We have to be somewhere every night with a bed. We don't camp.
Good.
We like showers and restaurants, and don't drink any alcohol when we're riding at all. So we need to be near a restaurant where we can walk to and have a glass of wine. So the people always ask me if we camp or we just pick a direction and go. It's like, no, we don't do that.
It's somewhat romantic, but not that romantic. It's
not romantic at all. Yeah. It's like you're outside all day, even though you're not doing physical activity. It is arduous. It is physically strenuous. Mm-hmm. You have to be alert, and you're in the elements. So,
where'd motorcycling start for you?
It started when I met my husband a long time ago. And we, like more than 20 years ago. And he took me out for a ride on his motorcycle exactly one time. And I was like, I need one of these. So I went, I was working at a restaurant at the time. We were living in Boston. And I was finishing my degree at the same time. So I was working, I had a very complicated schedule of working at night and going to school during the day. And I had a friend who worked at the restaurant with me who had this old Honda 360 twin 70s model, gorgeous little $200 motorcycle. He's like, now they're thousands of dollars, but it was so cute. And he was talking about getting a new bike, and I basically just went, like, you need to get a new bike. That bike's too small for you.
Shove.
Give it to me, and by the way, you have to teach me to ride it too. So, but that's what we did. I bought it for $200. It was the sweetest thing. It had a kickstart. It had an electrical problem. It would,
But it was your baby.
It would die. You had to actually. Eventually, I learned I had to. When I left it somewhere for more than an hour, I had to disconnect the battery if I wanted.
Yeah.
But then there was the kickstart, which you could get. But I was so short that running and jumping on the kickstart was a whole another complicated matter. But my friend Brian Bell taught me to ride, sold me the bike, and then had the distinct pleasure of also teaching me to ride. So we did that in a parking lot in Southie, and then ever since, that's now on my third bike.
Yeah, my friend Ian would insist that I ask, what do you ride?
It is a 2006 Harley Davidson 883 XL with a stage 1 upgrade. So it's actually, so the 883 is the engine size. It's 883 cubic centimeters. But when you do an upgrade, there are stages of upgrade. You could actually turn this into a 1200, which I don't want to do, but you do various stages, and the first thing is a stage 1, which gives it more power. And they do something with it has a carburetor also, which is, this was the last year they made them with that. Everything, now they're all EFI. So I'm getting out of my depth with technical discussion of motorcycles now, but when I had the upgrade done, they did give you a new exhaust, and they do something with the carburetor. Okay, I'm a dumb old girl. There you go. There it is. It's out there. Anyway, so that's what it is. And it has a custom seat and a 4.5 gallon tank, which is really important because when we take these long trips, we end up places where there's no gas. And we took a trip around. We did a circle tour of Lake Superior a couple of years ago, and it was like, wow, there's absolutely nothing out here, you know?
I had this with a pal of mine, in a completely different context. We're up in the Catskills in his Tesla, and it was knowing how much range there was. And I was like, John Eric, you know, we don't actually have like satellite coverage here, so we can't even see the GPS map to know how far the next station is. He's like, apparently it doesn't matter. We're on the slightest downward grade, so we're not losing any range on this battery at all. So we just went for like an hour, just slightly downhill the whole way.
It's funny that you would mention that, because when I did the upgrade to the bike, this makes perfect sense, but I didn't know this, and nobody mentioned it. But suddenly the gas mileage that I was getting changed dramatically because the bike takes more gas. It's a bit of a bug, but it's fact, and it's significant. And so there was a period of time there where I would be like, occasionally like, whoa.
Guess we're getting a little.
And I don't have a gas gauge. I mean, that's something you can have with a motorcycle, but it's definitely not a standard issue item.
Yeah.
It's certainly not on mine. And, so I would ride around down the hills and shut the engine off and coast and stuff like that. And, but the best story about not knowing where the next gas station is years ago, Ron is my husband, we rented bikes. We went out, it was in the winter, so we flew out to Palm Springs. We flew out to San Diego and then drove to Palm Springs, and they have a motorcycle rental at the airport there. It's a tiny airport. It's not really an airport. It's an airport in quotes. Yeah. But we rented bikes, and then we were driving around, Palm Springs. At one point we went to Las Vegas, and at one point we were just driving near old Route 66. There's a great little spot called Amboy, which is a town of literally 4. That is their actual population. Wow. They made some news years ago, about 15 years ago, tried to sell themselves on eBay.
I remember that.
And they featured, the film Baghdad Cafe was filmed there. But so there's a gas station there that anybody who rides a motorcycle out there knows about. It's called Roy's. And it's a motel too, but I don't know if the motel's still operational. It's quite picturesque, and it's right on old Route 66. And there's the big Route 66 on the road, painted on the road. And so we went to Roy's, and then this was November, so it's pretty pleasant during the day, but as soon as it gets dark, it's winter, and dark in November comes at like 5:30 and like very quickly. Yeah. So we're riding away from Roy's, and we know this is important. You calculate how far the next gas station is. Motorcycles get great gas mileage, but they don't have big tanks. Even a big motorcycle tank is not big. So we're just riding along. We're driving through the Mojave Desert. Ron is in front of me, and he's sort of leading the way. And I'm like, whatever, I'm having the best time of my life. And eventually we stop, and we go to a gas station where he lets me know that the whole time we were doing that, he wasn't sure if we had taken a wrong turn. And we might actually end up like, oh yes, we're going to get eaten by coyotes in the Mojave Desert.
Wow.
Tonight. But we didn't, clearly. So
congrats.
Yeah.
So unlike my father, motorcycles weren't a midlife thing for you. They were actually early.
Yeah.
And at what point did you start integrating, again, what you saw from the road into your art?
Very recently. I mean, this work is quite narrative for me. I've been painting things like, I mentioned before, I do this whole other body of work that involves painting the surfaces of my hands and close-ups of my irises and prior to that, I mean, I painted the skin for a long time, and I also did a whole series of paintings of the ocean, like just looking straight, as if you were, they are all over compositions, sort of like abstract expressionism in that way, in that there's no edges or ends. It's like you're just putting a viewfinder straight down into it. So all of these pieces are composed that way. There's no contextual information. There's no body contour or edge. It's the edge. It goes to the edge of the canvas, and it's cool because it's a little abstract that way. It's clear what you're looking at. But anyway, this work is very narrative for me, in that there's some kind of structure that's much more. I keep wanting to use the word narrative, but that's the word.
Literal? I mean, everything is literal in that respect.
No,
like
the other work is actually more literal.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
Elemental, more visceral, and but there's a plot here, sort of. It's a place.
And someone got to that place.
It's a road. It's a, and why? I'm not even sure. I was in some. Frequently, I will transition from one body of work to the next not in a deliberate way. Like I mentioned before that I don't stop working. I work all the time. I just keep painting. I don't think that it's advisable to stop. I think that's where you can get stuck and, full of yourself and think, oh, I don't know what to do now, and I'm going to make. I'm not going to make something important. So therefore, I have to wait till I have a revelation, which is annoying and not the way it works for me. And pretentious, potentially, but maybe for some people it works the way. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so I tend to pick, just sort of go like, well, I want to keep making something. I don't know, I basically work on something until it doesn't interest me anymore. And then I keep working. Sometimes I'll keep working on the thing even though I've lost, not super engaged with it. And sometimes I make really interesting, I think, good paintings then, because you've pushed through the honeymoon phase and you're no longer thrilled with every aspect of it, but then I don't know, sometimes that results in good work. In
the sense that you understand it better? That it's now distanced enough?
I'm not sure exactly.
Okay. It's art, so it's ineffable in a lot of respects. But.
That I have to be interested in something to make it, just to keep doing it.
Yeah.
That's a luxury I have. I don't work at Verizon. But I have. No, I haven't. But I've done work where it's so. But anyway, I digress.
That's what this show is about. You've listened.
Good, I know. Thank God. Yeah. So what I'll do then is sometimes I'll meander over to some thing I was mildly interested in, or some picture I took. I always, and when you asked me before about source imagery and where that comes from, I take pictures. I do not sketch things in advance of making a painting, but I sketch sometimes when I'm out. Okay. Those things hardly ever turn into paintings, but it's like soaking it in, so to speak. It's like, and memories. So I have these little things around my studio that are either discarded or never fully considered ideas, or it's something that's so stupid that I just want to push some paint around, but I don't want there to be any stakes. And sometimes that stuff ends up being really the next thing that I can't stop working on. And I think that's how it happens. I mean, when I started, I think the first one of these kind of paintings that I made with all this content, all this context and content and whatnot, was of a little white building in Nova Scotia. When we were on a motorcycle, you can take motorcycle trips to Nova Scotia, and I highly recommend it. So you can take you can drive up through, you can actually drive to Nova Scotia pretty much, but it's long and involved, and there are ferries. There are different ferries. You can drive up through Maine and then get this ferry that goes to St. John and then over to Digby, or you can take a fast ferry from Portland, Maine, which takes 5 hours, and then you are there.
Yeah.
And there's nobody else there, so it's a great place to ride a motorcycle. I mean, it's amazingly, they've got the landscape's stunning, and it's not very populated, except for Halifax and stuff like that. You can go to places like that, which I have done. Anyway, I think I just picked up this picture I took, and it was one of these like, just, oh my God, that's so beautiful, this weird, I have no idea what this was. It was a white building with a just shrieking red piece of trim in a blue sky that was like too beautiful to even believe it was real, in some little lot. And it's probably a municipal, I don't know what it was. Nobody was around. And I think that was the first one that I did. And then I made it round. I had a round canvas around because for a little while I was making these, they were like circular, taking that idea of just looking right into the surface of the ocean or the surface of the hand or whatever, and having absolutely nothing to indicate location or no context.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that could be round. That would make it even less pictorial.
Sure.
And so I had some round canvases. And then it's like, oh, round canvases. That's kind of like a rear view mirror on the motorcycle. And I made them. This was a big one for that kind of thing. It was 12 inches in diameter. And I don't know. I think that's how it started. And then I got, and then as often happens with these things, something kind of random and, just something to sort of flush out the brain ends up being like, oh, I'm into that. And I'll keep doing that for a decade.
I would say that's a part I don't understand, but we're around episode 360 now. So I sort of get the, wow, you just kind of keep doing it one after another.
It keeps, as long as it keeps me entertained, as long as it keeps being interesting. And then sometimes a little past that point.
Favorite destination? Is there a particular, or is the whole point that you go places you aren't used to? So
it's a couple of things. I'm going to utter an astonishing, just a tedious cliche, but it's really about the journey.
Yeah, no, that's what I assume.
But it is, it's like the locations are along the way. And the roads, this is not a joke, this is not a cliche, in that Ron maps out our trips based on where there's a good road to ride on.
Yeah.
And, we pick a direction, and we usually have a destination that's like the furthest point, like Memphis, and then whatever's in between here and there, and then we pick. But Provincetown, Cape Cod, is one of my favorite places in the world. Although I don't ride my bike there much, I have, but it's not a good place to ride because they don't have very many roads, and it's sandy and dangerous. Absolutely only person I ever knew who was killed on a bike was killed on the Cape, thrown off the back, taking a curve on the sand. So, but that is a sentimental
you said
place.
The family had a
house in Wellfleet, which is 2 towns back, and that's a super favorite destination. I spend a lot of time in the Catskills because it's nearby and stunning. Just there's so much up there, for short local trips. P-Town, I'd have to say. That would be the one place where I could possibly lay down and die happily, but not too soon.
And not on the back of a bike.
Definitely. I would never be on the back of a bike, but I'd be on the front getting myself killed.
And whoever else is, where did art, I know it's a weird, super broad question, but where did art making start? I was a precocious kid, with regards to that. Encouraged by the family?
I always not discouraged. And encouraged. My parents were both, my father was a neurophysicist, which means he did medical research on the nervous system involving the physics of the nervous system. My mother was a professor of English. They both taught at the University of Pittsburgh. But they also both did creative stuff, art making, everybody played instruments. My dad did a little bit of wood carving. My mother did some painting. It was just something that was, people did stuff like that. So that was around, but I had talent, sort of whatever that word maybe should be used in quotes, who knows, but I had a natural ability to draw. So it was, when you're a little kid, approval is good.
Yeah.
So I think, what you're drawn to things that people are saying you do well. And I loved it, but I was also, I was a natural. It was easy in a way. I was also good at math and things like when I got a lot of, I'm self-analyzing, but I think this is true. I got a lot of approval for those things.
Yeah.
So
Was there a point, though, where it started to get tough and you had to figure out?
Well, so when I went to
and this will be where our lives diverge because I just gave up. But go on.
Yeah. So when it was sort of like in my mind as foregone conclusion, I'll be an artist when I grow up. Until I was in the, maybe 15 or 16, and it was like, oh, but I am also good at I could have done something in the sciences or with math. I wasn't so interested in science, except for I'm interested in anatomy. That's obvious. But I never wanted to do it. I'm squeamish as all fuck. I would never be any kind of doctor. Oh, yeah. I thought all of a sudden I was like 16. I was like, wow, maybe I shouldn't just go to an art school because then I will. Also, I didn't ever want to be somebody who didn't know anything about anything except the thing that I specialized in. And I was concerned about choosing something of such magnitude at that age. I thought, well, I definitely want to learn about other things. I honestly think I had a unusual insight into that. I might not know what I want right now.
Yeah.
That might be something I'll figure out later. So I ended up going initially to SUNY at Purchase because they had a very, very well-respected arts school within their school, but their liberal arts was great too. And I entered that school in the liberal arts program. I eventually reapplied, and which was good because it was a competitive school. You couldn't just scamper on over to the art school. You had to get in, which was great. But my challenge came when I did that, because I was always getting the A's in art in school because, it was easy and I was good at it. And a lot of people aren't as good, so it's easy. Whatever. That was an easy A for me. And I had not challenged myself. And I took a foundation drawing class, just 2-semester class with a teacher who had the audacity to give me a C in the first semester. I was like, what the actual fuck? Are you kidding me? But, of course, from there and coasting on my laurels, 19-year-old, 18-year-old. I was actually 17 when I went to college. So, and he basically said, you can do better than this. Yes, it's adequate work, but you're not trying. You're not putting anything into this.
Yeah.
And so in a weird way, it was this backhanded compliment, but it motivated me.
Yeah.
And that's sort of that point at which you go like, this is not just enchantment and fun or, you work at this. And I work really hard now. I work a lot. As mentioned, I don't take like long periods of, I don't wait for the angels to flutter around and tell me, here's a good idea. But in the process of making the work, even when I'm not stuck at all, it's work. And that kind of discipline did not come naturally to me. I'm a hedonistic person and I lack patience, but I have tenacity. And that's a little bit better for this.
Did biking teach you anything as far as habits?
Yes, just sit still and shut up.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
It's a wonderful
were there things that
thing.
It opened you up to?
Quiet in my mind. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful way to be with another person without having to talk to them, which I like. I can talk a lot sometimes, like now. I'm talking. I had a little coffee. It helps. But there will be long stretches of time that I spend by myself, and I love that. And I find it very draining to be around other people who need to be talking to me all the time. And some people just thrive on that, and there's no judgment there one way or the other. Yeah. I'm just the other way.
They're just wired differently.
Yes,
generally.
and I can't take that. I'll run out the room. I'll try to, but to be on a bike with somebody, not on the same bike.
But to be biking.
You're riding with somebody, it's the best kind of intimacy in a way, because we're in this thing together. It's like we're just encapsulated in it's almost like we're in like a couple little spaceships. but we're very linked, but we're very separate. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful kind of quiet to have in your head. And you're sitting there for a long, long time. And the first time we went on one of these long trips, I was like, what the hell am I going to do? I'm going to be bored. I don't know. I remember the only analogy I can make is years ago I had some friends who bought a big schooner ship because they were
insane.
They were retired drug dealers.
Okay.
They had a bunch of money, and they didn't. Anyway, they bought this huge boat, and it was a like 158-foot schooner, and they kept it. It was in Boston, and they we'll go and hang out on the boat and, smoke pot or whatever. And then they were like, well, we're going to go, everybody wanted to go out on the boat, and they would take it out. But it was Boston Harbor, or wherever they kept it in Boston Harbor. Because the boat was so big and had so many sails, it was a 3-masted schooner. And in the harbor, I'm out of my depth technically, but you couldn't get the boat in full sail. It took a couple of hours to get to the place where you could do that. So any excursion on this boat was at least 4 hours, but more likely it was like 12. And I remember thinking, like, I will go bananas. What will I do? I'll be trapped. I won't be able to leave, because I like to leave when I'm ready, and anywhere.
I'm hip.
I have my own car, whatever the circumstances. Like, and I remember just going, like, it was kind of terrified to do this, but I was like, I'm going to do it. And I did it, and it was just it was the exact opposite. It was completely liberating, because I couldn't do anything at all. I could just be on the boat, and I didn't have to work or anything. I could if I wanted to, but it was just like, oh, it's this complete liberation from any kind of responsibility. It's like riding in the car at night or driving the motorcycle on a quiet road and in nowhere. This is the thing that you are doing. You cannot do anything else. You cannot attend to obligations. You can't call people. You can't write email. You can think all you want, but you don't have to do anything but this thing that you're doing. And that's an aspect of biking that's awesome. You just to be paying attention and alert, and you feel very alive. I think if you're doing it right, you feel very alive, because you should not be,
half-assing it, not
paying attention.
I was wondering, you're in New York, of New York. Do you feel your art doesn't have an urban thing? It
doesn't.
Is that a response to living in the city in
not
that
at
respect,
all.
Or just is just not what appeals to me?
I just, like the paint, the skin and iris paintings and the art to me is not, the fact that I sort of ended up making these, what could loosely be described as landscapes, has nothing to do with where I am. Obviously, they aren't of this place, although a lot of them are of the area. But I think of art as the thing that does not, in a more academic, I guess, realm, although my work is not particularly academic, but conceptually, I think of art as happening within an arts place in your mind, within a historical context or something like that. So it doesn't have anything, to me, is nothing unusual about it not reflecting my physical environment. That said, when I first moved to Manhattan, I painted big close-ups of Gerber daisies, because they were these crazy explosions of brilliant, otherworldly color. Things, they don't even look real to me. Yeah. They're like, how can anything be like, it's so, the contours are so perfect. It's like, really? Yeah. That's nature? But it was so exciting to be coming. I came to New York, and it was like, well, it's pretty, it's dirty and gray. And I've been here many times before, but it's very exciting. It's very urban. It's all kinds of things. But those things stuck out to me like bizarrely, as in they're just these explosions of color and beauty in very dingy places, bodegas, flower shops. So I paint that. So then I did do that, but in such a ass backward way. Yeah. That was New York.
The non-urban thing in the middle of the city became your subject.
The bright, shiny thing. It was so funny, but it was there. And I never saw that in Boston, and I never saw it anywhere else. It's a very New York thing, the bodega flower style. Yeah. Maybe in Paris cat, they have them, but... Sorry?
And the bodega cat, of course.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I love them.
So, influences as far as... style goes?
So I have, it's interesting, for this show I wrote a little bit of a statement in which I don't mention painters, and I knew that I wasn't mentioning painters. Painters that have had an enormous, an important impact on me are painters that I have sort of worked through, like when you first start being a serious artist, or you think you're a serious artist, you have these things.
We could say a humorless artist. I'm just kidding.
Humorless, full of yourself, whatever.
But yeah, you have
and
those
then
early...
you worked through those things, and then so Philip Guston's late work, it was just like gut punch to me. I was like, oh my God, it's the best art in the world, but I'm not like that. I tried to make work like that for a while until it was like, nah, it's not. The abstract expression, I had a very, very inspirational teacher in college who wrote the book about abstract expressionism, Irving Sandler. And he wrote a book called The Triumph of American Painting. And he died just recently, a couple years ago, at 90-something. But he was so inspiring. And so I grew up making art, but I didn't have, I wasn't so sophisticated. Like some of the kids who grew up in New York, they knew more about things. Like I didn't, we have some art in Pittsburgh. There's the Carnegie Museum and stuff like that, but it's not like being here. So he was showing me stuff that I never even knew anything about. Plus, I don't like old religious art. I have huge respect for these things, but it does not move me. And I'm very.
It's like when I go to the Frick, there's that one room off to the side. I'm like, I just have no interest in Madonnas and not religion.
It's not that it's bad. It's just, I think it actually makes perfect sense. It's like trying to get it, as a child, I have no connection to that.
Right.
As a young person, I still have no connection to that. But I think my orientation in the world is this is another thing that's very American. It's like now is what, like when first time I went to Europe in my 20s, I was very surprised at how American I was, because I didn't think of myself that way, because I grew up in a very liberal, lefty kind of place where my parents were politically engaged, which meant critical in many ways, and marching and whatnot, but not with this disdain so much but I was very prepared to be, have that liberal embrace of the ugly American and vaguely embarrassed of myself. And then I realized when I was there, I was like, oh, I don't feel that way. In fact, I'm mildly offended by that expectation. And it surprised me because I just didn't know that. And then, in Europe, I was in Paris and London, and then later I went to Amsterdam. Incredibly beautiful. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to love it there. And I did for a hot minute, and then it felt very old and oppressive, and the history and it
weighs on you, even when you look down from the airplane.
Immediately weighed. I mean, it's so quickly did I feel dragged down by that I realized I don't really like this. I'm never going to be an expat. This is not, and I weirdly also missed being. I didn't like being. An expat.
The American out in the...
Not so much because of how other people perceive me, but I was surprised at how much I actually... I'm not home. I like home because I, again, grew up in with a critical, healthily critical perspective. So with art, too, I grew up with zero religion. We were a secular Jewish family. I learned more about... Everything I know about religion has been represented in a painting, pretty much, so that's not part of my, the fabric of my being. So all that stuff was like old and not exciting. Then Irving Sandler showing me like action painting, and it was like so, now it's sort of like a little, cliched and dated, but still that work is incredible. But the way that the whole life like approach, I don't want to say lifestyle because they're all dead from various horrible things, but just to be like so excited and making things, gestural things and big, huge works and stuff that had all this vibrance. And it was the opposite of the art history that I would have
part of the
before
curriculum.
1945. Let's just say that, or maybe before Courbet, let's say. So we can go back a little bit. I'll let Sargent slide on in there. Manet, Manet, huge favorite from a very beginning. Guston, coming a little further into contemporary, and then I would say, so I'm not Guston and I'm not Manet, and I have, as far as in terms of like I struggled for a long time to make works that were less realistic and more painterly and gestural, and it's like I love that shit, but that's not what I have a natural inclination to make things that are, the thing that I'd say that I'm most good at is seeing. And, I can make things look real because I see that, what it is that makes it, not because I'm like some genius of rendering or whatever. I'm good at that because of my ability to see what is right or not. Or it's a little hard to explain, but it's not so much. Like I knew a guy who's a teacher, not one of mine, but a painter, an older painter, and he said I could teach a dental hygienist to be a photorealist because, not that they could be an artist, but they could make those.
Copy something.
They could make those marks because it requires manual dexterity, control, and discipline, but that's not the thing that. And I have some of that, but not as much as other people. But so my ability is really about looking and seeing. So gestural painting is wonderful, but it goes away from who I ultimately found myself to be. And it was like there's another kind of quote. I think it's John Cage. So John Cage, Jasper Johns, and Merce Cunningham collaborated on a variety of things. And I can't remember whether it was Johns or Cage who said this. I think it was Jasper Johns, because it's an artist thing. But anyway, the quote, whomever it is attributable to, is basically that when you go into the studio, you're in there with everybody. Your family, your mother and your father, your friends, your teachers, all the things you've read. And then you sit there long enough, eventually every one of those people leaves. And then if you're really lucky, you leave too. And that's when you make the good stuff. That he doesn't say that's when you make the good stuff. But the gist of it is like you discard all those things that the voices in your head, so to speak, including your own. And then, so my influences now, I would say, are more like writers and when I think about the stuff that I really soaked up as a young person, as I continue to, or things like, going back to that kind of like spooky, what's exactly going on here, kind of David Lynch movies and Diane Arbus pictures. And I have a lot of photography and I think sometimes my work could look cinematic. I've had that word put to it. And it looks like these strange, like there's an artist named Gregory Crudson. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a photographer, and he literally sets up like film set type setups for his work and then takes pictures. And they're very weird, like suburban kind of things. And there's always something completely wrong with it. You can't exactly, it's not that obvious. So stuff like that influences me now. Or not so much more now, but I realize that's where I look back and go, that's what that is. And one of my favorite books and movies, because I saw the movie before I read the book, is Slaughterhouse-Five. And do you know this book?
Yeah.
So
I went to college in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, I saw the movie when I was a kid. It was on television on some random station, and I had no idea what it was.
Yeah, it makes no sense, especially the younger you are.
Well, I was like 12, and I thought, like, what is this? But it has resonated with me forever. And Billy's jumping in and out of, like, he sort of, like, never really belongs where he is. Or it's either everything is completely familiar in a disturbing way, or the flip side is everything is not familiar. And that... I belong here. I recognize this, and it's totally alien, kind of dichotomy. I don't want to use the word dichotomy because I don't know if it's exactly the right thing, but duality. That's how I exist in the world, and that's the kind of stuff that really moves my work forward.
Yeah, Ben Katcher talked about that many, many years ago. I saw him speaking. The cartoonist who used to do... in the alt weeklies, Julius Knipple, real estate photographer, back in the Village Voice in the 80s and 90s. Okay. But he just talked about this phenomenon of becoming a deliberate tourist and just coming to an intersection you're used to from a different direction and just seeing it, from a different perspective than the one you're 100% familiar with because you've always gone this one route.
Yeah.
That sense of, making the familiar alien to
I think
yourself.
that I don't do that on purpose.
Yeah.
That is what happens
that's the
to
thing.
me.
That's art.
But I periodically feel suddenly that everything, even the most things, I just suddenly feel like everything is unfamiliar. It's like, I feel disassociated from my life. Yeah. And not in a bad way, but in it is a little disturbing. But I feel it always makes me think of Billy Pilgrim. Yeah. Is this what that was intending to? I mean, I think he was actually kind of talking about quantum physics, but
it was the dislocation.
Which is really fascinating to me, and I love that idea of I love the idea of there never being a beginning or an end or time not existing on a linear, because then nobody dies, and that's good.
Which was also one of the weirder things. One of my past guests brought up, not in a podcast, but in a post of his, John Crowley, All Along the Watchtower by Dylan and Hendrix and all.
Yeah.
John's convinced it's a loop, and you're coming into it right near the end. Because if you actually go through the lyrics, it takes you right back to the two riders we're approaching, and then at the very beginning you get who the two riders are, and there must be some kind of way out of this place. Right. They're constantly looping again and again through the same song. I'm like, God damn it, that's why you're a genius of a writer, and I'm some schlub from New Jersey. Okay, you and Dylan saw this, Might not be accurate, but whatever. But that sense of dislocation
is overrated.
I know. That sense of dislocation, though, that again, post World War II thing. If you're in America and this world doesn't make any sense to you, you're Billy Pilgrim.
That's interesting because I'm not quite the right age. That's another thing that I breathed. You breathed it in.
Well, we inherited a world, though. Yeah. You're around my age. We inherited a world where it could have ended at any moment. None of us would have known why. Like I explained to our neighbors' high school age kids, I'm like, I know climate change is an absolute horrific thing that you guys are facing, but it's incremental and it's growing. With us, we literally grew up with nuclear annihilation.
Right.
And that was just in the back of everybody's brains that, this could just happen and we'll be gone, instantly.
Because it's interesting that those things were not actually spoken of, but I'm sure that, like I said, you breathe it in. Yeah. It's it's the world you're in. Like, I don't recall anybody actually saying something like that.
No.
And,
but you remember air raid drills when you were in, you didn't have those in school?
I don't think, maybe we're not quite the same age. Yeah.
Close-ish, 1971.
Yeah. Okay. No, we didn't have them then. Because they were. They weren't doing that in Squirrel Hill.
Yeah, they could have been. They just said, "Fuck it, we're done. Whatever happens, we're just gonna drop the bomb."
Who's gonna drop a bomb on Pittsburgh?
We figured we're 25 miles from New York City, so we would have a chance at surviving if we open the lockers and duck underneath.
Pittsburgh is 1,000 miles from, not 1,000. It's 600.
Yeah.
Oh wait, you're from New Jersey.
Yeah,
you were 25 miles. From
I'm 25 miles from the city. You're.
It's across Alabama, as James Carville calls Pennsylvania. He says you've got Pittsburgh at one end and Philadelphia at the other end and Alabama in between, which I was unaware of because we were going to Cape Cod.
Yes, I met Carville once at a political fundraiser, and my wife is from Louisiana, so I had to get a picture of the two of us, but it's not pretty.
Have you seen Bill Hader's impression?
Yes.
It's very good.
And he is one of those personalities. If you can just nail the inflection, you've got all the Carville you need. Yeah. But it's but I'm just saying, like, we grew up with that.
That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And
that allegedly, history changed on us when we were becoming adults.
Yeah.
But
allegedly. Allegedly.
Yeah. When we were of age, I guess. But
this little bright shiny object over here.
Now, well, let me ask, though, when it comes to art and your progression within it, do you feel you got better at things technically, or do you feel you more found the things to shed? And because you mentioned working through other styles and
I came back to who I am. I mean, that didn't take a long time. I mean, also things are fashionable, not fashionable. And, now rendering realistic painting is very popular. There's a lot of it going on. Whereas 20 years ago, not so much. I mean, you can want to be what's involved in what's happening, what's quote unquote important now, but it's like, it's not going to be anything if it isn't what's right for you. You're just going to be posturing, and this is the only career in which you really just don't have to do that. If you want to just go along, get along, you should go to law school, do something else. This is the one thing, I think you can, if you don't do this true to yourself, don't do it.
They can smell bullshit on you.
Well, there's also no point. I mean, it's the whole exciting thing about making your own expression is it's your own expression. So if you tailor it to meet somebody else's expectation, that is not what it is anymore. And you might as well do something that has a more guaranteed income.
That's what I was going to say. The rewards for doing this.
Nobody's forcing you to do this. Right.
So it is evening in America.
It is sure
outside. One thing is there anything you explicitly want a viewer to see?
No.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
People see things. I want to put someone there. That's the thing that I do with that. That's the perspective that I'm adopting within the work. I want you to. I'm trying to make. I make pictures of situations that you're supposed to feel like you're in there. Mm-hmm. That's why. So, for instance, some things are in focus, some things are shadowy. Sharp focus is not like as a human animal or any animal. When you're in a situation, there's a lot of sensory data that you're taking in, but visually you only see some things sharply. You focus, you can turn your head and you can look around and you can have a wide view, but some of it is tight and sharp and some of it is very impressionistic or shadowy is still a word I prefer to use. And I just want you to feel that you're there. I don't want false notes. I mean, some of these settings are very contrived on one level. I tend to paint them as I find them, but I'm aware. I'm pointing a viewfinder at something.
You're selecting.
I am very deliberately selecting like this creepy little hotel that I shot. I shot a picture of the painting behind you from the balcony of a motel that I stay in a lot in the Catskills. And that is an actual scene, but it's from very far away and there's a whole bunch of shit in front that I didn't put in the picture, so it's very composed, but I want you to be there. Yeah. So, but what you think about that, I don't know. I mean, I have no control over that. Don't want to have control over that. I don't like art that is manipulative in that way, Yeah. You're supposed to feel this, and I want you to feel sad or angry or this or even anything. Yeah. So no, I don't.
Good.
I hope you feel something.
I'll try and get to the opening. It'll be the same day we post this episode, but that'll be great. Edie, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for asking me. I was vaguely terrified. I really appreciate the opportunity to blather on.
And that was Edie Nadelhaft. Her new exhibition, Evening in America, runs from December 10th, 2019 to January 25th, 2020 at the Lyons Weir Gallery at 542 West 24th Street in New York City. Lyons is Lyons, Weir is Wier. There'll be an opening reception on Thursday, December 12th, 2019 at 6 p.m. And like I say, the paintings in Evening in America are really just evocative and compelling. They're strangely gorgeous. And if you're in the city, I hope you get a chance to check it out. Now, you can look up Edie's paintings and her writing at edienadelhaft.com, which is EDIENADELHAFT.com. And it's also got some of her biometrics paintings and her bovine portraits in hexadecimal hue, which are bizarrely self-explanatory. She's also on Instagram as Edie Nadelhaft, spelled the same way, all one word. She's also on Twitter, but not very active there. And after we wrapped, I asked Edie, so, who you been reading? And if you want to hear her answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. The third quarter 2019 episode is up now, and it features an hour of book recommendations and fun conversation with Carl Stevens, Emily Nussbaum, Kate Maruyama, Laniers, Christopher Brown, Caleb Crane, David Shields, Dawn Raffel, Amor Tolles, Simon Doonan, Simon Critchley, and Sylvia Nickerson. You can support the Virtual Memories Show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for patrons, including that podcast, a patron-only blog, handwritten show notes for every episode, my secret project, blah, 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 and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. Now, I recorded this one as part of an insane 3 podcasts in 2 boroughs day. So $12 for the GW, $35 for parking, $11 for subways. I'm sure I stopped and ate and drank coffee at various points. And anyway, it was a bunch of money. You'll hear the other 2 episodes next month or next year, which is the same thing. And if you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or just toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. Special thanks go out to Nick Bartosik, Buzz Carter, Michael Hacker, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Annie Koyama, Jonathan Kranz, Kevin Katila, Jack Lescamella, Stephen Nadler, Barbara Nessim, Jim Ottaviani, George Pfau, Payne Prophet, Dmitry Samarov, David Small, Stephen Solomon, Greg Tanner, Ford Thomas, Armando Veve, and Garrett Zecker for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.